Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the kickoff of the I-75 Cap Feasibility Study. My name is James Fitzler, Urban Evolution Strategist with the Downtown Detroit Partnership and Project Manager of the I-75 Cap project. Next slide. So at the meeting this evening, we're going to start with a quick introduction of the project. We're going to review previous phase outcomes, then review the current scope of work of the feasibility study. We're going to review the public engagement schedule and planned activities and follow and conclude with a question and answer next steps. Next slide. So the I-75 CAP project is really a partnership between three entities, the Downtown Detroit Partnership, the Michigan Department of Transportation, and the City of Detroit. But the real and really the most important partnership in this is our partnership with you, the community, to help inform the project, to provide your input, to stay engaged throughout its development, so that at the end of this, we come away with a project that is fully supported by the community, that is really kind of generated by the community. And so continuing to stay engaged, provide your thoughts, your input is really the key to this project success. And so we look forward to continuing to partner with you through future phases of the work. Next slide. And with that, I will turn it over to Jeremy Windsor from AECOM to present the outcomes of the previous phases of work that we've had on the I-75 CAP project.
All right, thanks, James. As he said, I am Jeremy Windsor. I'm a transportation planner with AECOM based here in Detroit, and we are supporting DDP and all the project partners on consideration of this CAP. And the current work that we're launching is going to get more detail into the feasibility of the CAP and what could be presented on them. But it really is standing upon some previous work that's been done, and I want to make sure to review that and kind of talk about the vision for the CAPs themselves that was developed through some work last year. First of all, I should acknowledge that this work is built upon a number of previous efforts. One is the I-375 Reconnecting Communities project, which of course looked at the corridor of 375 along the eastern edge of downtown and has been looking for ways to reconnect across that divide to neighborhoods to the east. This I-75 project has a lot of similarities in terms of the intent of the project, but is very different and a completely separate effort. And the project improvements that we're talking about as part of this phase are not contingent upon the 375 project in any way, in a separate effort. I should also reflect on the District Detroit process and the community benefits agreement process that was associated with building out that area around the Little Caesars Arena, which identified the bridging across I-75 as a high priority with the community. And so this work really does kind of follow on the precedent that was set during that study to look at ways to bridge across I-75 through this central area between downtown and midtown. And then finally, the previous phase of work that I mentioned, that I'll go into a little bit more in detail, was the vision and alternatives analysis study that was completed in 2024, which looked at different options for capping of I-75 and set some priorities and a vision for what that could look like. So that vision and alternatives analysis went through a process and was very much community engagement oriented, setting goals and needs based on community input, looking at different options for how the CAPs could be built, where they could be built, and what could be on them, and then selection of a preferred option for further development into a feasibility study. My colleague Dina is going to talk a little bit more about what we want to accomplish during that feasibility study, but I'm going to talk a little bit more about what we accomplished in the vision and alternatives analysis. So I mentioned engagement. During that time, we had 3 rounds of interactive public engagement meetings. Each of those, or overall, those had more than 200 attendees at them. There's some pictures down below of some of the workshopping that we held at the MSU Center in Detroit, which is just north of the CAP areas. Each round of engagement was also supplemented by digital engagement, and we got over 1,100 survey responses on things like the placement of the caps and what should go on them and what the priorities were for reconnecting across I-75. We also engaged with a stakeholder committee of neighborhood, business, and institutional representatives from in and around the CAP area and had a number of meetings with those groups. And we had some targeted outreach as well, some small group meetings with small businesses, with seniors, and with youth from Cass Tech to get some of their opinions on the CAP themselves. Some of the primary findings from that first phase, I think in terms of public input, one of the things that we heard a lot was that the CAP design really needed to consider and represent what the resident population needed, and not just be a venue for visitors and tourists. We really needed to prioritize connectivity and safety for bikes and pedestrians that cross I-75 and would like to in the future. And that the amenities that the CAPs would support should really be focused on the surrounding neighborhoods and additive to those neighborhoods rather than reproducing what's out there today. So we established project needs and goals that talked about how these CAPs could mitigate impacts of urban cohesion and quality of life, ways that we could integrate and address safety issues along streets and specifically transportation safety. And we also wanted to make sure that we're considering equity and the long-term development and growth of these neighborhoods to the north and to the south. Understanding that what's going to be out there in the future, or in the very near future, might be different than what is there today in some cases. On the engineering and design side, we looked at the possibilities of very large-scale caps versus smaller-scale caps and made a decision to really strategically locate caps at a number of different locations. The advantages of that are that larger scale caps significantly add cost and complexity, would really require that the cross-section of I-75, which is not going away, would need to completely change, be lowered potentially, and that would have a lot of downstream and upstream impacts on utilities and make for a much more long timeline and large-scale project. So the strategy that was developed during that first phase was to strategically locate some smaller scale caps, but ones that would still allow for significant public space, the kinds of parks that you might be familiar with from in and around the downtown, at that scale at a few different locations. So the vision that we developed really showed 3 different caps, a west cap that would connect around the area around 3rd and 2nd, and with Grand River in between, a central cap that would be positioned around Woodward, and an east cap that would be positioned between John R. and Brush. And each of these caps would offer some different types of amenities. The caps themselves would have benefits of shielding the people from the highway by reducing noise and hiding it visually. These would create green spaces and recreational spaces that would have different characters, and we'll talk about those in a minute. But they would be supplemented by enhancements to the surrounding streetscape as well, that would enhance safety, slower vehicle speeds, and support alternative modes of transportation. So the preferred option, as I mentioned, has 3 different caps. An east cap that would be representing more of a neighborhood gathering space with a target toward the needs of the developing Brush Park neighborhood to the north. Central cap, which would be more of a vibrant hub for the entertainment districts that's on either side of I-75 today. And a west cap that is going to meet the needs, the daily needs of a lot of the users kind of on that western edge of the downtown, which already includes Cass Tech high school students, but also will soon include students from the University of Michigan Center for Innovation. The next few slides get into what those different caps could look like on the ground. And we really set a vision with this previous phase for the types of improvements that could be developed, but not necessarily the actual design that will be presented within those cap areas. That's something that we're intending to figure out during this phase. So the East Cap would have recreational amenities as shown here, places for children, places for dogs, recreational space for local residents. The East Cap would also include some accompanying streetscape improvements, understanding that if the caps themselves were built without these accompanying improvements, the access to them might not be as desired. So right now we know that getting across I-75 is loud, it can be hot, there's a lack of green space. But in the future, with that cap in place and with some accompanying improvements on adjacent streets, there would be opportunities to better connect these cap areas to the neighborhoods to the north and to the south. The central cap would be more that visitor space, that major event space. Here we're showing potential for music venues or community facilities that could be used for major events in the city. Similarly, the streetscapes around the cap could be changed to prioritize safe connectivity and slower speeds, prioritize the presence of transit assets like the Q line and the dedicated transit lane that's already traveling across in front of LCA today. The West Cap would be a pocket for daily activity from some of the student and other neighborhood population that is in and around this area. You might see in this space places for food vendors and small businesses to be able to provide amenities to the local neighborhood that's growing in this zone. And here's a view of what Grand River might look like, or what it does look like today and what it might look like in the future with additional green and streetscaping, some additional bicycle amenities that would reinforce the bike lane and travel along this corridor, and additional street crossings that lead to pedestrian safety for this zone. So that's really the vision that was set during the previous phase. I'm going to turn it over to Dina to talk about where we want to go and take this next.
Great. Thank you very much, Jeremy. As Jeremy said, I'm Dina Fox, also with AECOM, and we are very excited about what this phase of the effort represents because we know that it's going to bring us significantly closer to understanding a lot of the variables that are required in order to make the caps a reality. It's very important for us to bear in mind that the information that we learn during this phase, including the feedback that we receive from you, will directly inform the parameters that we know everybody is eager to better understand, such as schedule, cost, and of course the sequencing for the project. So we can go to the next slide, and there are 4 primary areas of focus for this current phase, for this scope of work that we're undertaking now. We've summarized some of the timing for each of those, beginning with community engagement, as well as the initial stages of transportation design and engineering. Both of those work streams are mobilized in parallel, and will both run through the majority of the duration of this current phase of work, ending in summer of 2026. We can go to the next slide. That work will inform the 2 latter areas of focus, which are park design and placemaking and the funding analysis aspects of the work. So you can see here that we've illustrated, again, that timeline where the community engagement and the transportation design and engineering efforts are really inputs for some of the work that's happening a little bit later in the life cycle of this phase, park design and placemaking and the funding analysis. So as previously mentioned, the purpose for today's meeting is really with you the current state of the effort, but also to share the ways in which you can continue to engage in the process as it moves forward. And in a few minutes, you'll hear from George Etheridge, who's going to share more about the opportunities to do that. So we wanted to also walk through a number of the questions that this phase of work is and to help us answer. To begin with, we know that there's some really important thought that wants to be taken into consideration for specific elements on each of the each of the park caps, as Jeremy alluded to earlier. In addition to some of the structures and the amenities, we also think it's important to be thoughtful about what programming each park will include, as well as the physical design aspects for each of the spaces. We are really trying to be very purposeful and taking an intentional approach that each cap should have its own identity that's responsive to as well as representative of the users that are most likely to spend time there. And so that's another reason why we believe that the community engagement aspects of the work are so important. From a funding perspective, we're looking to better understand how the project will, how much it will cost to build the caps, as well as how the project will meet environmental regulations for federally funded projects in particular. We also know it's very important to have a very thoughtful plan around the ongoing maintenance and operations for all of the spaces involved in developing these new caps. We're also looking to understand some questions around transportation. So, for example, circulation strategies for both vehicles and pedestrians, not only navigating to the caps themselves, but also navigating around them, are very important considerations for this part of the effort. We also want to make sure that we're promoting access for multiple modes of transportation while also still accommodating and planning for the event traffic that we know is such an important aspect of the vitality and social life in this area. We also think it's very important to think about how the caps themselves will function during the events, as well as during, of course, non-event times. And also how the bridge structure should be designed to accommodate the caps, as well as provide appropriate ventilation and drainage, which obviously is very important to think about for the long-term durability of the caps and the cap structures. So these are all things that we've already initiated our investigation for, and we're looking to better understand as an outcome of the current feasibility study phase. So we will look forward to hearing more from you, and I am going to now hand it over to George Etheridge, who will speak about some of the opportunities to do that.
Thank you so very much, Dina, and good evening, all. Once again, I want to thank you all for being here and taking the time. As it was alluded to in the beginning of the meeting, you are one of our vital key stakeholders. And again, thank you for your participation because this could not be possible without you. Again, I'm George Etheridge with Activate Detroit, your community engagement partner, along with my colleague Terrence Thomas. Again, thank you for being here and helping us to ensure that authentic community engagement takes place throughout this process. We've developed these proposed engagement activities in partnership with community stakeholders. We welcome your feedback on any of these activities as your input will directly inform the final design of the proposed I-75 highway caps. Our first engagement category focuses on refining schematic park designs based on community priorities. These charrettes will include interactive mapping exercises, physical modeling, storytelling integration, which is something that you'll hear about in greater detail momentarily. We're seeking stories from legacy residents who lived in the corridor before I-75's development, as well as from current residents impacted by the highway's infrastructure. Our second category includes focused outreach within the project area. Again, the project area is bounded by Mack Avenue to the north, Michigan Avenue to the south, Brush Street to the east, and 3rd Street to the west. We plan to engage with senior residents to connect with legacy residents and business owners, youth and students, building on our successful Phase 1 collaboration with Cass Tech High School, small business owners, particularly along the Grand River corridor and throughout the district, and then finally legacy families with historical ties to the corridor. Our digital engagement strategy includes online surveys, interactive engagement exercises, cap visualization tools with community comment integration, and a collection of historical narratives and stories. Next slide, please. As you can see, we have a proposed timeline. Here we are in October of 2025 with the initial community engagement meetings, this being the first of which in kicking off this feasibility study. In winter of 2026, particularly in January, we're looking to have interactive park design sessions and mobility workshops at your existing community meetings. So again, it's vitally important that we hear from you and your level of interest in engaging with this project. In spring of 2026, we're looking to having the refined designs incorporating your feedback. And finally, in the summer of next year, we're looking to have a final design presentation and stewardship plan. Again, your voices are so crucial given that these are the spaces and places that you're helping to create. We want to bring these activities to your tenant association meetings, neighborhood gatherings, and CDC meetings. Please share your meeting schedules so we can engage with your communities directly. While the the Downtown Detroit Partnership will manage these spaces, we want the community to take ownership of what's developed. Your voices shape this project's future. And next slide. So as I indicated, we will be having a story collection component in which we will hear directly from you, legacy residents and business owners within the corridor. While I'm about to introduce our next presenter, award-winning historian Rebecca Savage, I did want to kind of tee up her segment. It is my privilege to introduce our next speaker again, historian Rebecca Savage, who joins us today to discuss the critical intersection of infrastructure, community, and historical memory. As it was stated earlier, the I-75 Capping Feasibility Study we're gathered to discuss represents more than an engineering assessment or an urban planning initiative. It's funded through the U.S. Department of Transportation's Reconnecting Community Grants Program. This project acknowledges a fundamental truth that our nation's highway infrastructure was too often built at the expense of thriving neighborhoods, severing communities and displacing families who called these places home. We recognize that when highways were constructed through American cities in the mid-20th century, it was predominantly Black and Brown communities that bore the brunt of this disruption. Though we must also acknowledge that regardless of its composition, communities of every hue were affected. Each community has its own stories, it has its own history, its own fabric of relationships and institutions that were fractured and are lost. This is why the work of historians like Rebecca is so essential to projects like ours. We cannot move forward to reconnect what was divided without first understanding what was lost. We must capture these stories, the memories of neighbors who knew every storefront, the accounts of families whose roots ran deep in these streets, the histories of churches and businesses and gathering places that form the backbone of community life. These stories matter. They deserve to be documented, preserved, and honored. That way, they will never be forgotten. Rebecca brings to this work a deep commitment to ensuring that the voices of displaced communities are heard and remembered as we chart a path toward healing and reconnection. And with that, I'll defer to Rebecca Savage.
Thanks, George. So we'll start with the next slide and talk about some early history. And the next slide, yeah. Well, we acknowledge the Native Americans who were the first on this land. They included the Chippewa, Ottawa, and Potawatomi nations. We know that the Wyandot, Iroquois, Fox, Miami, and Sauk tribes all traveled through this area. Today's borders were not relevant to them, and we know they lived on both sides of the river. But the first European settlers here in the early 1700s allocated land for what we call ribbon farms that extended from the Detroit River to northwards to about where I-94 crosses Woodward and crosses through the city. So those ribbon farms were in existence for about 100 years. The most significance were sort of in the center there next to Woodward Avenue, and one was the Cass Farm, and then on the east side of Woodward was the Brush Farm. So those farms, we still refer to the names of those property owners today, Brush Park, etc. Okay, next slide. Well, by the 1860s, those farms were completely subdivided into subdivision lots for houses. And this is like, I cut out a small portion of a Sanborn map to show how densely populated the area was and that the housing was very close together. So this street is called High Street. High Street was known through the Detroit area, but it later by the 1920s was changed to Verner Highway. So I just kind of wanted you to see the type of housing that was here. It was similar to those kind of few brush park houses that remain today. Next slide. So here's some examples of High Street and pictures of the housing that was there. You can see how close together these houses were. So they were, large 2- and 3-story homes. And Verner Highway kind of became one of the major east-west travel routes in Detroit. Next slide. Well, this photo from the 1890s shows that, of course, the major churches were built in the area on Woodward. And so to the right side of this image is St. John's Episcopal Church. And on the left side of the image is Woodward Baptist Church. So there were commercial buildings in the center between the two churches, and you can imagine that all through this area. Next slide. So there were smaller churches as well. So where there are people, there's usually some churches. This one, built in 1911, was New Jerusalem Church at Cass and High Street. Next slide. Well, as you know, by the 1920s, Detroit's population exploded, and we know that there were over 800,000 people living in the city of Detroit by 1920. And so the kind of demand for housing really caused a lot of those single-family homes that I just showed you to be demolished for what were called hotels, but they were really kind of multifamily multifamily apartments. So in this image, you can see West Verner Highway at the top of the screen. And then below that are the different hotels. So there's the Hotel Clayton, Hotel Olds, Royal Palm Hotel, Hotel Rex, Hotel Majestic. Today, only the Royal Palm Hotel still stands. That's at the right side of the screen, that blue colored building. So it was a very, very densely populated area at that time. Okay, next slide. Well, by the mid-century era, we know that the Verner Highway East Verner Highway, was really a center for African-American businesses to locate. A man named Rod Arroyo mapped the 1952 Booker T. Washington Trade Association directory. So you can see at the bottom, East Verner Highway, and the African American businesses there. And of course, along Hastings Street to the right was the most highest concentration of those businesses. So this area, of course, was called Paradise Valley in Detroit. And yeah, it was a very significant and thriving neighborhood. Next slide. One of the most famous businesses in the neighborhood was owned by Joe Louis, the boxer. So his restaurant was called the Brown Bomber Chicken Shack, and we know it was very successful and a popular place. Next slide. Some other African American businesses. Club Maxine was a place to go dancing. There's some showgirls from one of the other clubs where you could go see a you know, kind of dinner dance type of business. And then the image on the left, I'm just showing how one of those houses was sold to become a place of business. And that's what was happening. Next slide. Well, in 1947, Detroit's city plan was where the expressways that we have today were mapped and put in the planning stage. It was another 10 years before they were actually implemented, and that's what kind of Detroit's planning priority was. This image from 1965 shows that Detroit Edison completely removed the street grid and kind of put their own plan in place. So those are the changes that have happened to this area over the decades. And I'll just mention that in 1924, my grandfather immigrated to Detroit and lived in a small room on Winder Street in the Brush Park neighborhood. And that's kind of my personal story of the family history I have in the neighborhood. So that's a very quick and fast summary.
Thank you so very much. As we indicated, before I-75 divided our neighborhoods, a vibrant community thrived between Brush and Third. We are collecting stories from families and businesses who called this area home before the freeway changed everything. Your memories matter. They are the threads that weave together our neighborhood's true history. We want to hear about it. We want to hear your family stories from residents who lived in the corridor, local businesses that served in the community, neighborhood life before construction began, community traditions and gatherings, and the impacts of displacement and change. Next slide, please. Again, we want you to share your story, and this is how you can do it. Option one, you can scan the QR code located on your screen. You can put it in your name and contact information on the form that's there. Again, it's just looking for your name, contact information, be it phone number or email, and someone from our team will be in contact with you. Option two, you can send an email with your name and contact information to theroadahead@downtowndetroit.org. Again, that's theroadahead@downtowndetroit.org. Our team will follow up to discuss how you can submit written memories or photos, record audio testimonies, share family documents or artifacts, and connect with other community members. Next slide, please. Again, we want to leave you with every story is important. Every voice deserves to be heard. Help us honor the legacy of those who came before and ensure that their stories are never forgotten. And I will defer to James to close it out.
Thanks, everyone. Hopefully this was a good introduction to the I-75 Cap Feasibility Study. As George mentioned, please stay engaged through the road ahead at downtowndetroit.org. You can sign up for email communications regarding the project. Once again, that's the road ahead at downtowndetroit.org. And we look forward to further engaging with you as the I-75 Cap project progresses. Thank you very much for attending.